Bene's Bloody Bits.
More like Bene as late as can be. I apologize. I had a dentist appointment that ran really long, but thank you, Malcolm, for waiting. I know this kept you up a little bit longer than you wanted to be.
It's all good. I knew as soon as I put the TV on, I knew you'd pop up on the screen because that's what always happens.
That's the way it works. Yeah, so this video, I wanted to focus on a filmmaker that his name is Anthony Hickox. He passed away last year. His name might not, jump to mind when people think about, great horror filmmakers. They might think of the usual suspects of Wes Craven and John Carpenter and Dario and all that. But really, these guys, we need these guys, the smaller guys, as much as the bigger guys.
Definitely.
Especially in the 80s and 90s, when some of the stuff is direct to video, some of it's theatrical. But when we go back and look at this guy's films, his filmography, you'll realize how many favorites of yours that he directed.
Yeah.
And the first one that comes to mind is Waxwork. I mean, just the casting alone. Michelle Johnson from Blame It on Rio. David Warner, Zach Galligan from Gremlins. Deborah Foreman. Deborah Foreman, from My Tutor and all these great films. So,
and don't forget Patrick McNay.
Waxwork is probably considered, like, of all his films, the one that people like the most. I think it's got the cast, it's got the production value that people remember, and it's also, what do you think, a very original premise too.
Yeah, I think it's really original. I think the whole each one's like this stage based on on a movie character, and that they can end up inside it and they could live or die, possibly depending on if they can get out. Which, spoilers, it's a horror movie with comedy in it, so they probably don't, all of them. I think it's very original, and I like the whole story about it being like 18 of the most dangerous evil creatures in history, and if they all get somebody for once they're dead, it becomes a part of that scene in that real world. So, for instance, just to explain that, if someone goes in and they think like someone becomes a werewolf after getting bitten and they die, their dead body is on the set next to it and part of it, but most people don't realise because it just fits in perfectly.
I like that it's a supernatural kind of museum, right? The settings are, and also there's definitely a nod to Universal classic monsters within all these different set pieces. I think that's the director most likely grew up with these films. So you got the werewolf and you got these different scenarios that it's just fun. David Warner, being the curator of this place, and it's just like a maze. It's a fun maze of different horror, scenes. And I think in the late 80s, originality wasn't very good with a lot of the sequels and stuff. But then you got a movie like this that comes along that just works perfectly, really.
Well, when I was watching it, I thought, this Dracula section looks a lot like the Flesh of Frankenstein set, the white room and everything. It looks a lot like that a little bit.
And I'm trying to remember his name. The guy with the long hair was Tarzan the Ape Man. Milos O'Keefe, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, the prettiest guy in the film is from Tarzan the Ape Man. So really good casting. Yeah, just it's kind of like I don't even know if this film received a theatrical release. If it did, it was very small through Vestron. It could have been direct to video.
Yeah, it could have been. I think the first one probably was limited showing, possibly. I do think the second one was straight to video, though.
Now, when did you first see Waxwork?
I think about 10, 12 years ago on DVD. I recently picked up the Blu-ray a couple of years ago and watched it again then. And it does look so much clearer and so much better. So, yeah, I didn't see it on VHS as a kid. So Yeah, bad DVD. I think I picked it up in somewhere like CX or Cash Converters over here, which is like a pawn shop, you know?
Well, that makes sense because you were born in '88 and this film came out the same year.
Yeah, so, you know, I probably missed it. And I don't remember seeing it being around that much either.
I mean, I spent a lot of times in video stores, and I think that's where I first saw it, was renting it on VHS for sure, but probably not even until the early '90s. A little bit late
Yeah,
to the game.
I think people in America were a lot luckier when it comes to their selections because, you know, I think there was a lot more availability. As over here, we had a lot of films that kind of were pushed away, you know, for a long period.
Yeah, so Waxwork is definitely like a late '80s great film. I think when people speak of some of their favorite films from that decade, this one always tends to come up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what's interesting, you know, I really wish Anthony is one person I really wish I would have got to interview. I know that his family was in the industry, and there was a lot of like, oh, well, he's just a Nepo baby, meaning nepotism is how he got into the industry. I don't care how someone got into the industry. If having family or friends that are filmmakers helps you get along and makes you a better at your craft. M. Night Shyamalan's daughter just directed a film. I don't have a problem with that either, you know.
And it weren't a bad film either.
I didn't get to see was it The Watchers?
Yeah, it's not bad for it's not a brilliant film, but for a first time director, it's not bad.
Yeah, so Waxwork is definitely a thumbs up. And then, you know, a few years later, you know, the film was so successful that we got Waxwork 2. And I actually, as much as I like the original, I prefer this because this one's more specific. When they jump to different points in time, we land in Alien, the movie.
Yes.
We land on Dawn of the Dead. We land on The Haunting. I really feel like this was like Waxwork was Anthony's kind of like films he grew up with. And then the sequel is more like the films that he watched as he was older, as an adult, but he had an affinity for. And even though Deborah Foreman does get recast in this film, long story short, Anthony Hickox and Deborah Foreman dated for a while there. But the time this movie came out, they had broken up. So that's why she was recast. Just a little FYI for people. But we still got Zach Galligan. We got the hand that survives at the end of Waxwork, making it into the second film. I give a slight edge to this film over the original. I really dig it.
I really think it's a beautiful looking film in HD, especially the haunting section in the black and white looks amazing. It's just so beautiful, and you can tell from the way it's shot and the different areas and times, as well as, you know, the different films it's trying to make into like comedy horror as well at the same time. But there is a real love and there is a depth to the skill as a director, which I think is really nice, because the other films, they show that, but they don't show it as much as this film. You can really see the passion, the different style of like, oh, look, these are the costumes for these different areas, but it's the angles, it's the lighting. The haunting section's perfect. The Nosferatu section is really good, and there's Drew Barrymore in it, and the same.
Yeah, folks, really quickly, and what Malcolm is referencing in the Nosferatu in the bed scene, there's kind of like an uncredited cameo by Drew Barrymore. And if you blink, you miss it. But she's definitely in it. And actually, the thumbnail for this video, I made a point to put it in there, but you probably can't really see it. But again, with the great casting, we got Bruce Campbell in a small role. And Zach Galligan's great. I mean, I've always enjoyed him in the two Gremlins films. I think he has a charm about him. I did interview him for Delirium, and he didn't go into details, but when we talked about Waxwork too, he kind of was going through a rough patch in his personal life, but he didn't go into details. I don't, they don't say, I don't go ask, details. But he just talked about how Anthony would like have a lot of zoom shots in his face, and it got, as an actor, it got a little bit tedious for him. But being a trooper, You would never tell when you watch the movie, as well as, you know, what's his name? There's another person in there that had like a drinking problem. And in real life. Yeah, you know, Bruce Campbell on the extra features on the Blu-ray disc does reference that, but I think that's kind of an open secret. Again, once the director says, you know, action, he's a professional and he's good to go.
Yeah. I also liked that you had the one of the henchmen from Die Hard in it as well, playing the medieval villain.
Which guy is that? I forgot about that.
The blonde-haired guy, the main bad guy in that section.
I really would like to know who did the casting. Who is the casting director on these two Waxworks films? Because production value is great, and just they were able to get the right people. I just think that's something with the low budget direct-to-video market of the last 25 years. You don't see that level.
That's true. I mean, some of the funniest parts in the movie were when Patrick Mooney returns, but he's a bird, and he goes, "This is the only way I could be back in the film." And then you had Martin Kemp from Spandau Ballet playing Victor von Frankenstein at the beginning. You know, each section had somebody you'd know from the 80s, which I thought was incredible.
Malcolm is bringing the heat and the facts, so give him a round of applause, because I like Spandau Ballet. I had no, you know, until this. Just now, I had no clue that there was somebody from Spandau Ballet.
What I should have said is Spandau Ballet and EastEnders soap star Martin Kemp.
Hey, all I know is this much is true. But anyway,
very clever.
Just so you know, folks, you can buy on Blu-ray. It's still available. A Blu-ray double feature from Vestron's collection, Waxwork, Waxwork 2. The picture quality looks
stunning,
pretty much mints, and the price is really good. The Vestrons used to be quite expensive, but they have gone down over the last few years. So those are two bangers from Anthony Hickox.
It did make me question one thing, though. What would happen if Jack the Ripper met Nosferatu?
Well, speaking of Jack the Ripper, just David Warner was Jack the Ripper in a film called Time After Time with Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen, who were a couple at the time, 1979, kind of like a science fiction romance film. Very recommended. So now we come upon Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. So first movie, Hellraiser, was directed by Clive Barker. Hellbound Part 2 was directed by Tony Randall. For a third film in a series and the second sequel, this one just is crazy and wild and out there, and there's new Cenobites, and the lead girls are beautiful. And I've told you in the past, I'm not a big fan of prequels or over explaining, but I really feel like this is the best acting Doug Bradley's ever done, because they did allow him to be Pinhead, of course, but go back and find out the man who finds the lament configuration and how he becomes obsessed with it. I really think this movie kicks all sorts of ass and is really appreciated.
What's her name? The girl in it.
Well, I know the brunette's Paula Marshall, which she's also in Warlock, the Armageddon, which we'll talk about.
This was Paula Marshall's first film ever.
Stunning. I also saw her on an episode of Seinfeld. I really wish she did more films. She had a nice career there in the 90s, but sometimes life takes over and you pick your priorities. But her,
well, I think for her first film, she did really well.
She just had that look, that very goth look, the dark hair, the dark eyes. Feel free to look up IMDb for the other lead. I want to say her name is Terry.
Okay, I'll do that now.
Yeah, I want to get her name right. I don't want to butcher it.
Okay, the other lead is called Terry Farrell.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to double check. But yeah, I really felt like they really let loose with this one. And this was from Dimension Films. Like the first time they got to be a part of the franchise.
Well, they had to, what do you call it, didn't they? They had to restart because the company that originally had the rights to 1 and 2 went under.
All right. Well, this is when Dimension with Bob and Harvey Weinstein, the early 90s, they really started to crank out horror films. I mean, this one, of course, most of other than the Hellraiser reboot that Hulu did, they did all the sequels leading up to that one. Of course, From Dusk Till Dawn and the sequels. And, but yeah, this didn't bother me. I remember at the time people were like, what is this bullshit? CD-ROM head, Cenobite and all these different characters. But it was kind of like Freddy Krueger, where what they liked in real life or whatever, became kind of who they were.
Yeah.
One person's a heavy smoker, so they smoke from their little, tracheotomy looking thing on their, and the CD head. I dug it. And there's that scene in the nightclub.
Yeah.
Where he lets loose with the chains and just rips people apart. And
yeah, I think altogether there's like 369 deaths in the movie.
What about just 69? Did you actually count every single death? Did you sit there frame by frame?
No, I put the kill count on and skimmed all the way through to the end and went, okay, 369. Because obviously there's people dead on the battlefield as well. So, and there's people dead in the clubs and stuff. But I think officially, if you counted only the people that got killed by Pinhead, it's probably like 100.
I just appreciate that, the duality of, not really making it a prequel, but kind of have, flashbacks to the sympathetic character, the guy he used to be, but it doesn't change the fact that once you see him as Pinhead, you still you still fear him, and there's that great scene toward the end where there's they kind of try to separate.
Yeah.
And Pinhead just is too strong. That evil has taken over the man he used to be, and a really great script. I really think this one, depending on what day you talk to me, I could say it's my favorite of the series, and tomorrow I could say it's 1, and next week Hellbound. I think the first 3, 4, Bloodline's a little bit weaker because the Weinsteins got way too involved. The original director was the makeup artist Kevin Yeager. He got fired, but I still like a lot of that film. But I think the first 3 films are absolutely solid.
I think number 3 is great in ways, but I do think Pinhead is because I prefer the Pinhead of 1 and 2, more calm, more like I own this. As in this, it just feels very unstable and very crazy. Like someone shot him up with drugs or something before we started. Like putting nail pins over his head and the nail stigmata thing, knocking stuff off counters, Temper is going to kill him. Stuff like that. That seems very un-Pinhead, but it's still fun. It's still a fun ride, and there's still a lot of positives with it. But I don't know. I prefer the Pinhead of the first 2, but it's still fun. I still like it.
Maybe in the first 2, he's a little bit darker, more gothic, more.
Yeah, I think it's because he's more. I don't know. He feels more like he's in control. He feels like he's more calm and collected, and it feels like he's got more control. As in the third one, it feels like he's just a man on a rampage dressed up as Pinhead in a weird way, even though it's the same guy. But the Elliot Spencer part really adds to the movie because it's like 2 sides of a coin, and when they go against each other in that moment, like you said. And I love the bit as well at the end where she sees her dad and it turns out it's not her dad. I just,
I just like that the movie delivered on the title, Hell on Earth. You actually got to see Pinhead and, out in daylight, which was different. They also take it to the streets, and it had like an apocalyptic feel to it. I really dug it, man. But so the first 3 films, how do you rank them?
I rank number 1, 2, and then 3. That's simple because I love Hellbound. I think Hellbound's great because the Cenobites kind of get killed off there by penis finger Chenard with the flower. I can't put that as number one, but number one to me is perfection in the whole dark horror gothic film. Number two, I think it's a great continuation. Number three, I think is third because I'm not as keen on the Cenobites. They just don't seem as. They just seem feel like cartoon characters for a part of a series thing. But then there are worse Cenobites later on in the series. So do you know what I mean? I do think I do like it. Don't get me wrong, but I just think it's a different feeling to the other two, which to me I think are like almost perfect horror.
Yeah, you definitely have perspective on the first 3 or 4 films when you get to Inferno and Hellseeker and Hellworld, and it just those become really muddled and not very good. So I even have a greater appreciation for Bloodline. I mean, he went to space, he did all these things, but it's not as good as the first 3. But
at least they actually feel like Hellraiser movies. After that, they really weren't. They were like movies just made into Hellraiser movies to sell them.
I enjoyed the original Warlock, directed by Steve Miner, who ironically, he directed a couple films we talked about last week, Friday the 13th, Part 2 and 3. But this was Anthony Hickox taking over, and I really, rest in peace to Julian Sands. Not only did we lose Anthony last year, we lost Julian Sands in the
sadest way possible.
Yeah, it was an accident out here in Southern California. Not to go into too much detail, but he was an avid mountain climber. Unfortunately, he went out by himself. For us, was a very cold and crazy winter. And, he passed away on the mountain. They don't know if it was an avalanche and he got snowed in. He wasn't found till a few months later. I don't want to be morbid, but I'm just kind of want to go over the facts of why the great Julian Sands, there's 3 Warlock films. He's the first 2, but he brought like a distinguished, attitude to this horror villain. And I like Warlock. This film's better. It just has a better budget. Paula Marshall's back. She worked with Anthony on Hellraiser 3. I dig the black blood that, Warlock actually, comes out of him. And it's just, it's a hoot. And there's a great Western scene. I know that Anthony was a big fan of Westerns, and we'll talk about Sundown in a little bit, but there's a scene where these, it's like, high noon, and these guys come out with their guns in the middle of the town, and the Warlock just uses his fingers, boom, and takes them
they're
out.
druids, aren't they? They're the protectors.
I love the druid storyline, man. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think this movie is fantastic. I love the birthing scene. And I love when he goes, "Don't you want me, mother?" and all this, and he's following her. And he goes, "Mother, open the door." I love that. It starts off with some great humour. The film reminds me so much of the early Wishmaster movies because of the kind of premise and the way he does things, like when people want things and he puts them in these other realities and stuff, or when he turns them into things. It's so great. I love this film. I watched this film actually for the first time this week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, first time. I'd seen the first one, the original one, but I had got the Blu-ray, the Veteran Blu-ray, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch this because of the thing. And I think Julian Sands nails it perfectly. It's so much better in this film than the first one because there's more of a kind of, like I'm better than you constantly and I can mess with you. I can... I'm in control at every moment. Unless somebody's hitting the leaf and he's bleeding everywhere or is feeding off people. I would say my favourite scene in the movie is probably the bit in the kind of like, House of Mirrors with the guy. Yeah. When the guy goes, "Ha ha, I beat you," and he goes, "It depends what side you're on." And the guy went into the other side. I just thought that was brilliant. But Julian Sands is perfect in the role. Do you know why? Do you know why he wasn't in the third one?
No, maybe a contract dispute or? I don't know. I don't know. You definitely, that is the weakest of the 3 films. The guy does an okay job, but he's not Julian Sands. I mean, It could be he was busy doing another film, but my thinking is probably money, but I don't know that for sure.
Well, the guy in the third one, is Bruce Payne, who's in full Eclipse. So,
yeah, but you're right though. This Wishmaster came out a few years after this, and I think they saw this movie and were definitely took some inspiration from it. I do like how the Warlock has to collect all these kind of gemstones, right, to bring about the end of the world and the return of Satan. And
I have to say, these supposed warriors that have to stop him are probably two of the worst warriors I've ever seen in my life. The first time the guy fights him, he's impaled and and almost dead. And then they're up against a tree. The CGI in this is hilarious as well because it's early CGI. So on the Blu-ray, it looks horrendous, but it adds to the charm.
Yeah, in its defense, I mean, Jurassic Park was the first well-known film, and that came out in '93. I want to say this came out in '93 as well. So they were definitely dealing with the beginnings of the technology. But sadly, I've seen movies recently that were worse than this film. So at least they had the excuse of it was the beginning of a new era of technology.
The best scene is when he's walking down like these invisible stairs, and you can see like this weird kind of fuzzy image of him from where they've done the work on it to make it look better around him, and he hasn't. It's just brilliant. It's so much fun. And I love the bit as well when he's in the car and the car is driving itself and he's looking over like the skin map thing and he picks up the sex worker. And she's like, oh, let me sort my hair out. Let me sort my hair. He rips her hair off and then just kicks her out the door. It's just brilliant. I just love it. I think it's a brilliant movie. And I think it's one of my top ones of his directing.
Did you own it before you watched it?
Yeah, I owned the Blu-ray set.
You just had never got to the second one?
No, I had the first one on VHS years ago. I remember watching that, but I didn't know about 2 and 3 until probably about 8 years ago.
What I appreciate about this film too is it just seems to move with a purpose, not like quick edits, just the script with the purpose. You never feel like you're bored. You always feel like there's something going on interesting, either visually, like, where he turns the guy into like a Picasso. Yes. He stretches the guy. It's just, I love that kind of energy. And this film is actually, I think it's improved for me. I've always enjoyed it. But I think over the years, I've liked, it's definitely like a 90s. If I did we already did a top 5 of the 90s, it would probably be in my top 20 for sure.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. It's so much fun.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I didn't realize you hadn't seen it. So, man, Full Eclipse is one of those films that's on, I believe that you can get it on DVD. Where's the Blu-ray? Unless it's in another country, you cannot get this on Blu-ray. This was released through HBO. Very good action horror hybrid, maybe more action than horror. And I like this.
I'd say more action with I'd say action with a horror twist.
I like that the Full Eclipse, the font and the colors looks like the X-Files. Obviously, this came out right around the time X-Files took off. I've always liked, the Van Peebles family. You have just have been in cinema for the longest time, and Mario Van Peebles was never a huge star, but '90s he kind of was like, when he was in something, you were always interested. I believe he did. Was it a movie called Solo?
He did Solo. He did Blowback. He did St. Valentine's Day. He did Highlander 3. I think he was also in New Jack C, which was probably one of his bigger movies.
He was pretty damn big in the '90s, and of course, I believe you have the dad, and then you have the son, and now Mario Van Peebles' son. He's his name is Mandela Van Peebles, and I just finished watching the second season of Reginald the Vampire.
Okay, and he's in that, is he?
And he looks exactly like Dad. They're like doppelgangers. Obviously, sons are supposed to look like fathers, but really, like, they look like,
Dead ringers.
Twins, identical twins. And this movie, I will admit, it's been a number of years since I've seen it, but I do remember enjoying it, renting it on VHS. I hope somebody puts out a Blu-ray of it. It's way overdue. Not talked about that much, but I think if more people see it, they'll love it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's got Paula Marshall in it again in a smaller role. Patsy Kensit's in it, right? And I've got to be honest, when I saw this, I didn't even recognise her originally because I was used to her being on Holby City when I was a kid, and she was older then. So, which is basically a hospital drama. You could call it a soap, I guess, because it's been on for like 40 years. But she was in that, and she was like this hot, sexy nurse person. So I kind of never thought of her being in movies until recently, but I had seen this before, just didn't realise it was her because she's so young in this, probably before the plastic surgery as well. But this movie, I like it. I like it a lot. I like the characters. I like how he's totally against it and he kind of gets forced into it. I like the whole idea that there's a team. But, it's like this elite team, but it's really creepy. I love the intense love-making scene between him and Patsy Kensit. And I love Bruce Payne in this because there's some weird homoerotica going on with him when he's touching Phil, going, "Oh, I can taste your sweat for your lying." He's getting all excited and all like thinking. It's really creepy. And then, you kind of look at these relationships that happen. But the rest of the team are kind of wasted because you don't really see much of them other than just being there. So it feels like a three-person show.
So we're talking the same Bruce Payne that's in Warlock 3.
Yes.
There's got to be a story. He must have been recommended for the role for Warlock 3 when Julian Sands couldn't do it. The fact he's in this Anthony Hickox film, there's got to be a connection. There's a story there. Unfortunately, we probably won't ever get the answer to that. But
I can tell you the story. The story is this. When Julian Sands left for whatever reason, they went, "Oh, look at this, full Eclipse," which came out 6 years before he was 6 years before he was the Warlock, right? So, in this, he's got very kind of Warlock kind of energies. So, like with the way he acts and looks and that, so I do think that probably was a part of it. Plus, in some ways, it's got that look kind of. Hello.
Like the blonde hair, good-looking guy.
Yeah, and that kind of demented look as well. Like where they can stare through you, kind of thing.
So definitely 2 thumbs up on Full Eclipse.
Full thumbs up.
I'm not the biggest Western fan in the world. And to be honest, it's probably one of my least favorite genres. But if you mix horror and Westerns like this film, which really doesn't get talked about, and even sometimes I know who directed it and who's in it, and I kind of forget about it. Again, Vestron put out a beautiful, release of this. Great extra features. When they talked to Hickox, it sounds like this one was his most personal film, like one of his favorites. Kind of like, just this, again, he brings back Deborah Foreman. So this had to have been shot before Waxwork 2 because he didn't mind her being in the film. David Carradine, Bruce Campbell. You can see the usual suspects of some of these actors he likes to work with. The late 80s and early 90s. He was so busy. You can see he's kind of going from one production to another. But I just like the premise of, you got the old school vampires who want to feed off humans, but you got, some people that want to leave that behind and want to be, more dignified and just kind of like live off this fake, blood. It's not the good thing. It doesn't taste as good. And there's that battle between the old generation, the new generation.
With the spike bullets.
Yeah, Maxwell Caulfield. I will bring him up because my wife loves Grease 2. She considers Grease 2 better than Grease. And so he is in this film as well. And just another bit of great casting. And Good effects. There's, I think it's not overly gory, but it has its moments. It's somebody who's not a big Western fan, for me to speak such highly of this film, it shows you how well it's done.
I don't think it's as westerny as it could have been. I think the ending is probably the most Western part of the whole movie, because it goes from being like them going in the desert to them being a part of purgatory to then this big, massive Western like shoot off and everything at the end to this massive revelation from David Carradine's character. To be honest with you, you could probably tell from the get-go anyway. But I do like the characters. I love the character of Shane. I love the way he was obsessed with the woman and the daughter, because he was like, "That's probably my daughter," right? And I loved in the end he got beaten by the human that he thought was worthless compared to him, and said it was always second to him. I liked the characters. I liked the character Malt, who just ripped someone's head off. I loved Bruce Campbell as Van Helsing. I loved how goofy he was. Now he easily falls in love with a vampire woman. And I love the ending. I love the ending, the joke at the end. Something about "don't leave it in vain," and then he starts laughing because it's like, "Vain, get you're a vampire." But the most weirdest part of the whole movie for me is when they lift the cross up.
Yeah, to kind of take them down.
Yeah, which is a bit weird, because when he goes, "Oh, we've been forgiven," I'm like, but you've been biting people and turning humans into vampires. How does that make you forgiven? Because technically you've still killed them, technically.
The budget didn't allow for them to go on any further. They kind of had to, this is what we can do in the time that we have. And I do remember the film maybe running about 15 minutes too long.
It does feel a bit long.
I feel like it should be 85, 90 minutes. I feel like it runs a little bit longer than that. It's not the end of the world. I do feel like it drags a little bit, and that's probably toward the end when it does do that.
When it gets to the bit where they all pull up in the cars, across that bridge bit, that's when it starts feeling like it's going on too long.
Yeah, I do remember. I've watched it twice, probably in the last 3 or 4 years, and I do remember the most recent viewing. I was like, it's still great. But again, I want to recap that Sundown is on Blu-ray from Vestron. There is a Warlock trilogy, which has part 2 from Vestron, and of course, Waxwork 1 and 2. But these 6 films we just kind of went over, that's like his Sinister 6. These are like, to me, like the top level films that he did. Now, after these films, he kind of steered away from horror and went more into action, maybe even thriller. Not as successful, but there are some good ones in there. I do enjoy Jill Rips, which is also known as Jill the Ripper, which I don't know if it's still available. Scream Factory put it on Blu-ray, but a limited edition run directly through their website. I don't know if those are still available. I like Dolph Lundgren. I like Ivan Drago. This is, not as good as the other films we talked about, but I still enjoy this one.
If he dies, he dies. It's an interesting film, because basically he's a drunk ex-cop whose brother was killed, and he's investigating this whole BDSM culture where men are being killed by a woman in like red latex. All I'm going to say about is the twist, obvious from the get-go, right? It's one of those movies that you watch and you're like, okay, I'm going through the motions. It's obvious. It's lackluster, but it's fun. Don't expect anything from it other than like a TV movie kind of feel. The best part in it is probably when Dolph was hanging upside down with his balls in this leather thing and getting hit with a candle. But it just doesn't, other than that, nothing much happens.
You don't
other than him
appreciate his
walking around.
balls? You don't appreciate
Oh,
he had the
I
balls
don't
to do
appreciate
that
his
scene?
balls.
Hey, he
And
had the
all I can,
balls to do that scene with his balls. I mean, give the guy some. It was a ballsy move. Come on there.
all I kept thinking was Grace Jones taught him for this movie.
Oh yeah, they were a kinky couple. Just go Google
They were
some
very
images of
kinky.
those two together.
They were very kinky, so that got him into this, I guess. But yeah, he has a couple of decent. I love how he goes from being almost killed to having like this sex scene with somebody, right? And then he gets tied up again. But yeah, it's okay.
Well, this was also in 1995. We got Seven, and that was very popular. A lot of serial killer thrillers came out in the wake of Seven. I don't know if anybody can reach those heights because that's a perfect film, but
Resurrection was good. The one with Christopher Lambert, that was very Seven-ish, and that was all right.
That's it. Yeah, Vinegar Syndrome put that out on Blu-ray, and it's Russell Mulcahy, who directed Highlander, directed this, and he kind of, in the interview with him, kind of downplayed the influence of Seven. It's like, dude, you fucking made Seven. You
It's definitely Seven.
remade it, but you had the more overt, religious arc to it. But it's like, dude, it's not a bad thing. I like your film, but dude, the desaturated look of the film, it's totally Seven Part 2,
Yeah. Even the body part, technically, when there's all the bodies in the thing. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what this is, it's I think when people do that, you just feel like going, come on, be honest with yourself.
It's nothing wrong with being influenced by another film, but so we go from Jill Rips to some more Dolph Lundgren. Now, obviously, Anthony is getting into the action, part of things. At mid to late 90s, he's steering away from horror. I couldn't even tell if this is on Blu-ray. It's probably not. This is the DVD.
It's not. It's only on DVD.
Yeah. If any of these films are with Artisan, that means they're underneath the Lionsgate umbrella. If they weren't very popular when they were released, and this one wasn't, your Blu-ray is probably, hold on to your VHS or DVD or whatever you have of it, or watch it on YouTube if somebody's uploaded it. I mean,
so the funny thing about this movie was it's made in 1999, right? And during that period, hey GB, during that period, everybody wanted buddy things because they'd seen things like, I'm guessing stuff like Rush Hour, stuff like, that. And he's got Sparks, probably one of the most annoying people in the world. Because whenever he says something, he's like, what? Oh, no. Oh. And then you've got Agent Locke and Agent Load, one of them played by Hickox himself, who gets killed almost instantly. He says, calm down, don't talk, and then gets shot in the chest. Then you've got these guys then you've got a really annoying wife. His wife is so annoying because she's like, oh, you want to take care of him for me, do you? And you're like, wow, talk about weird, right? And then the enemies, when they storm his house in their gear, the Serpent team, I think they're called the Serpent team, or the Snake Charmer team or whatever, they all decide, oh, we'll let him know. We're all going to smash just through his windows one at a time and let him shoot us. But basically the whole film is he's the only person that can fly this really top high grade military plane, and they need him to do this thing. So they frame him, and then they decide they're going to kidnap his family and kidnap him and force him to do it. But along the way, he goes on the run. Nobody realizes he's on the run because he goes into hospitals and sits in hospitals waiting. He works as a mechanic, steals an airplane. Nobody reports this to anybody. Everybody's looking for him, and you're like, it's in Paul Daylight walking down the street going to the bank with his bank card. How can you not know where he is? But there's a great fight in the back of an ice cream truck, and there's this great moment after he sees his wife injured. He just gets up and starts going bang, 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 bang in slow motion, and everybody dies. And you're like, wow.
I'm glad that you brought that Anthony Hickox. He actually did quite a bit of acting. If you he's also in Return of the Living Dead 3, Part 3.
And he's also in The Granny too.
Oh, I love that film. It's not on Blu-ray. That will be on an upcoming, where's the Blu-ray? But anyways, Anthony is in Return of the Living Dead Part 3, it's also directed by somebody you are very familiar with, Brian Usna. Remember him, the guy
Oh,
that directed
yeah.
The Dentist and The Dentist too?
Oh, well, yeah, you know. Okay, well, you know what? I'm not even going to say what I normally say.
Go, Mark Ruffalo's in there too.
Yeah, he's in there too. You didn't know that?
I love Waxwork 1 and 2. We do too, man. Those are just
Yeah,
fun.
we do.
Was that Mad George on effects on which one? I know. You know what? I don't know if Screaming Mad George did anything with Anthony Hickox. He did a ton of work with Brian Usna. I mean, you go down the line, Society,
Yeah.
you know, Faust, Love of the Damned. I mean, those guys were, you know, working together hand in hand. But okay, so this is an interesting. I like your take on this film. Because you railed on it so much, it makes me actually want to watch it more.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Submerged with Steven Seagal back when he didn't look like he ate Steven Seagal. I like
He was
it.
getting there.
He's kind of going through the, you know, the action direct-to-video action stars of the day. I don't think he worked with Jean-Claude Van Damme, but you know, we got some of these other guys, and
that's because he hated him. They hated each other.
Well, I know Van Damme and Seagal. There's epic, classic stories how they in real life were like at a party together. And this is depending on who you spoke to, but Van Damme basically said, "Okay, enough with this drama between us. Let's throw down right now, and settle this shit." And supposedly Seagal backed down, and a lot of people have said it. It's not on video. We weren't there, but it's very possible that, you know, he pussied out on that one.
Well, the reason for that was because he was a man of honor and respect, you know, and the way he learned was no fight, because it's always defense, apparently.
Yeah, what is that called? The defensive martial art,
isn't it?
Yeah. In his movies, he was always like breaking people's fingers, and if you attacked them, he kind of pushed you to the side, and then, you know, Van Damme had to do his splits. You know, he had to do his splits.
Yeah.
You know,
my mum used to love looking at his butt when he did that.
Did he ever show it? I know Time Cop, he was like in some shorts, but I don't know if he ever did it in the nude.
Yeah, I think there's a scene. I think it's in. I could be wrong, but I think it's in like Bloodsport, where he's like spread outside, and that bum. He's got an incredible bum. Well, he did. I doubt it's incredible now. With him being like 60 odd.
You mean he was muscular dude back then. So
yeah,
Submerged.
So Submerged basically is about Steven Seagal getting with an old team, and they've got to beat a scientist who's got this ability to use mind control drugs, and they've got to stop him basically. Other than that, it's a very basic movie that has Vinnie Jones in it, who is an English old man, used to be a footballer. So he got famous for being this really aggressive footballer, and that got him a movie career. To this day, he's in more movies now than most actors were then.
So this is not to the heights of Jill Ripped.
No, it's not. Even as an action film, the problem with Steven Seagal in this period was this was the period between him actually doing less action and more walking and more shooting to what he is now, where basically you just see his face on the screen and someone else doing the fights.
Yeah, when he does, I haven't watched an action film with him probably since prior to 2000. I know he's done quite a few, but between that hairline, which he hasn't really accept things, and, you know, he's just so heavy set now.
Yeah, he's like 4 times the size of that now.
Sometimes you have to leave well enough alone and kind of leave your heyday to the past. So
sometimes you have to leave your hair at the door.
So The Contaminated Man. This is, again, more thriller, not action. Again, something I think most people haven't seen.
I think this was a direct-to-TV movie, and it starred William Hurt, Peter Weller, and Natasha McElhone. Is that right? Her name? How you say it? Back at home. Either way, she's got really beautiful eyes. This is an interesting film because basically at the beginning, William Hurt's character, by the way, should have been a twin in a movie with Jeff Daniels, with the way he looks in this movie, with his hair and everything. I was
get
like, bloody
that from
hell.
the artwork very much, or Jeff Bridges
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. A mixture of both of them, yeah. And he goes home, and his wife is talking dirty to him on the phone, and he finds out she's not doing it, and he grabs hold of her, right? And you're like, oh. He goes to say goodnight to his kid, and she collapses on the floor, foaming at the mouth, dead. And then his daughter dies, and you're like, 3 years later. And Peter Weller's character has moved from Germany to Budapest to be doing this science stuff at this top secure facility, and they go, "You're fired. We don't need you." And he's going, "Well, I give my heart to this job," with a decent German accent, all right. And from my knowledge, anyway, I mean, somebody from Germany might go, "Oh, it's awful." So he rushes in, knocks it all over, and he gets infected while everybody else dies there. Thus, the contaminated man. William Hurt gets hired to basically look for him, and Natasha Megamorn, or whatever her name is, I'm just saying Natasha, make it easier. She goes with him, and basically start building this rapport with each other. So they go from place to place looking for him, and he touches people, and they die. You know, Peter Weir's character. Multiple times in this movie, William Hurt says to him, "You don't have to do anything. You're safe. I'm going to help you." And the FBI decide they just want to start shooting at him. So multiple times he runs off in the snow. At the end, he's like, "Oh, I love you," to Natasha, and she's like, "I love you too." They shoot Peter Weller after shooting William Hurt in the back for no reason, right? His blood spurts on her. He dies. She gets all infected. You're like, she's going to die. Nope, saves her with his blood. But anyway, the whole point is this film is mental. For a TV movie, it's violent, it's crazy, it makes the government look like madmen. Like, shoot, 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 you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
and you're like, crazy.
Hellraiser 3. Hickox did Hellraiser 3. So I'm thinking, in 1995, what was it? The movie Outbreak came out. I think this kind of was riding its coattails a little bit, but done as a TV film. I mean, I would rather have a film more like, The Incredible Melting Man, where it just was full on horror. But I get viral, horror, was kind of scary. Obviously, since coronavirus, those films became even more popular. And
well, there's a bit in this where he's on the train, right? And he's just coughing up. He's just coughing up, right? And the guy shoots him, and his blood is on the door, like walkway door thing. And instead of going, "Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna ignore that," one of the guys goes, "Oops, oh no." But why is it everybody else's blood foam affects them, but when people die that they care about and they're foaming at the mouth, it goes all over them, they're fine.
So now we have more like erotic thriller.
Yeah, this is great.
This is the kind of stuff that like all the boutique labels are dropping the ball on the whole, just the 90s alone, erotic thrillers or whatever. That whole post Basic Instinct, Fatal Attraction, all these films came in its wake. And I really wish that people would put these ones out. And we're basically focusing on a dozen Anthony Hickox films. He's actually done a few more, but I felt like these were good ones to focus on the horror, which I consider his best. And then now we're kind of like dropping down a level. They're not as good, but I kind of want to draw attention to them so people are aware of them.
Yeah.
The studio, Hellraiser 4. There's like a work print version out there, which is more like the director's cut. I think it's kind of
that's on the 4K.
Kind of like
the 4K set.
Again, it has to do with Bob and Harvey Weinstein. They kind of fucked up Hellraiser 4 as well as Halloween 6, and there's these work print producers cuts or director's cuts that kind of exist, but without the best picture quality.
That'd be incredible, wouldn't it?
Hellraiser Inferno was decent. That was directed by Scott Derrickson, who directed Sinister.
Yeah, Craig Schaefer was good in that.
Yeah, so I kind of want to circle back to where we began, you know, Waxwork 2, Hellraiser 3, Warlock 2, the Armageddon, Full Eclipse, Sundown. This is it really hurt me when he passed away. I don't know what happened, if he was ill or whatever, and he still was fairly young as far as I was concerned. I don't know if there was really good coverage of his passing. I felt like it was just a footnote. You know, if a horror website covered it, it kind of wasn't like a big deal. It kind of was like, oh, okay, yeah, he directed these few films. He passed away, and I get it. He's not David Cronenberg level. But, you know, when he did die, I didn't have a YouTube channel, and I felt like this is something I've wanted to do for a while. Kind of put the spotlight on him.
He died in Romania in October 2023. He was 64.
64 is not, you know, he's not a spring chicken, but, you know, he had a lot more years to live. So I definitely wanted, you know, focus on his career. I want to do this again with other filmmakers, regardless of, you know, whether they passed away or not. You know, you and I were going to do Jeff Burr, who did kind of a similar career. You know, you direct-to-video sequels or whatever. He was best known for probably Stepfather 2, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, Puppet Master 4 and 5, but his original films were the best, which was Night of the Scarecrow, and From a Whisper to a Scream, which is a superb horror anthology with the late Vincent Price. But Anthony Hickox, a really solid director.
Great director.
I think that when people go back and look at their collections, or people that were checking out video stores in the 80s and 90s, you realized how many of his videos you picked up off the shelf and you enjoyed.
Yeah. It is incredible, to be fair. I mean, I think the video store days were probably the best days when it comes to, you know, find random movies from the same director. Because I don't remember really, when I used to go to the video store, which was the late, I would say mid-90s, because I'd go with my mum, you'd just go by the artwork. And nowadays, now I've grown up, it's like Sakura Killers. This is a kind of ninja movie, martial arts movie. I didn't even know who Chuck Connors was until years later. You know, he was a decent star and everything in other films.
Well, for me, I was always a director-driven fan, so I always paid attention to the credits and the box art, and that's kind of I've always, even to this day, I'm that way. Anthony Hickox, wherever you are, your fans love you. We appreciate your work. Thank you for all that you've done. Yeah, man, I don't want to get too misty-eyed, but at the same time, I want to pay respect to somebody who I thought was very underappreciated when he was around. You know,
definitely. You know, just because. So it's like, I mean, he had a new film coming out, didn't he? When he passed,
he kept working. I mean, he you know, maybe not within horror like we would have preferred, but he was prolific and he kept busy. And Malcolm and I will be back on Thursday, August 1st for the Vinegar Syndrome drop. They got some new releases. We already know a couple of the titles. If you go to my YouTube channel and you can see the thumbnail, one of those has already been guaranteed. And based off the clues, the other one, we pretty sure we nailed it. But we'll be back.
I think we did.
We'll be
I'm
back.
looking forward to find out what the third one is.
I have no clue. And I know there's some partner labels. There's some VSAs. They just teased the banner today.
Two Hong Kong ones.
Yeah, but I don't want to go into it too much. I want to save some of that ammunition for Thursday. But thank you, Malcolm, for waiting for me, for taking so long. I come in here looking like Kramer after he went to the dentist, talking like this and shit. So my mouth is still a little bit numb. So, but you know what? No excuses. I still wanted to show up and do this. And thank you for everybody, all the people who commented. That was very awesome of you guys. All those kind of things help the channel. You know, still growing. Been doing this 6 months. So, yeah, thank you very much. And we're gonna say our goodbyes for now. But we will see you guys on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Okay, guys.